Hey everyone. Now, today's topic is a little bit more serious than what you might have seen with the other coaches, and in the sense of clinical aspect, right? The topic is the risk versus reward factor when we actually improve someone's health, right? And what I'm talking about is that in order for someone to get better, you have to apply a bit of risk. In a sense that, in a sense that, for an example, would be if you're a power lifter, you have to induce more load, more speed to the power, but you have a greater chance of an injury. So that's the risk reward. And the idea is to monitor how to actually assess and what is the best choice and how to minimize the risk, correct? So it happens a lot when you go into clinical population and even performance population. We kind of either don't know where to kind of hit the mark, or we go a little bit too far because we just want to get to a certain point. So my rule of thumb, whenever you're doing something, whether it's yourself or working with someone else, it's not magic. And it's not going to happen in one day. It's just not going to happen in one day. It takes time. And the reason why I bring this up, because it happens a lot around here. If you have a biomechanical problem or a chronic issue, that's been developed over a good long time, right? It's not acute. If we attempt to resolve something that happened within a long period of time, it's called instant gratification. And that's not true. Even that's an oxymoron. It's a paradox, right? Gratitude means long time appreciation, right? Instant means now. So it's a paradox. You can't do that. It just won't work. So in this case, when we go into things, at least here in our point of view, is we want to assess the person and where they currently are, right? Assess their motivation and assess how strong you are overall, mentally, physically, and spiritually, right? Because we talk about energy and quantum energy here. We also want to go over, what are the best options? If I have you doing squats now, does it have a higher risk of injuring you? Maybe I can include squats later on down the road as you get better. Same thing when it comes to the clinical pop. And now I'll actually talk about the clinical population. If I have someone who comes in and has heart disease, right? Doctor is giving them a limitation of 120 for a heart rate. Great, let's keep it at 120 for a heart rate. But they tell them they can't walk and they can't run. Why? When there's nothing absolutely wrong with them. When their MET levels is actually at 5 or 6, meaning that they could actually do something. They could actually jog if they want to at 6 METs. And they have biomechanical efficiency. If they could jog and keep their heart rate under 20, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to have them jog. Because one, I'm not over the risk of hitting 120 and above if their heart rate is low enough, right? And I have to, because then the morphology changes. If I don't push close enough to 120 and that restricted heart rate, and it could be because of cardiac myopathy, it could be because of hypertrophy, cardiac myopathy, it could be from left ventricular hypertrophy, whatever you can name them, right? It could be a pacemaker, but if I don't push this individual to at least get to a 118 constantly, and then give them a break and then go back into it, how would you expect that to change? So the idea is there is a little bit of risk, but there's more rewards, right? And a tiny amount is fine. If I go beyond the 120, now I'm adding maybe a tenfold of the risk. So when it comes to these clinical population things, you want to push the boundaries as close as you can to the restrictions they have, which is not easy, right? So back to the case of this person going to close to 120. If I get them close to 120, I have a higher chance of changing capillary densities, right? Meaning blood flow and oxygen saturation gets better, meaning their efficiency for cardiovascular improves by a little bit. Pulmonary, they start to breathe better because now they have to actually take in more oxygen to do the amount of work, which cardiac output changes too, correct? So their efficiency gets better. So I know I'm using big words this time, and that's kind of why we use a YouTube channel for these bigger talks and more of a professional view as opposed to our Instagram, where we have a lot more fun out of it, right? And I encourage you guys to actually go in it. Now the other thing, going back to my person, if I push them a little bit, their gait pattern is going to change, right? If they start to learn how to walk better, their efficiency gets better. They use less energy. Less energy means that the heart rate spikes less, right? So there's a lot of different benefits that comes by getting close to the border. And that's when, this is why I bring it up, because a lot of people have the fear of hitting the border, which is fine, but you have to get close to that borderline of, okay, this is too much of a risk. If not, you're not going to improve, or you're not going to see it quickly. You know, another good example was I had a guy who had a type A and a type B aneurysm, right? So it just means that there's a little bit of a leakage in the aortic arteries. So what did the doctor tell him? No isometrics, right? And the guy's been not doing isometrics for years, but he's got a stroke. So neurologically, you need to start retraining the nerve endings and what things to do, and isometric is one of the best things to do, aside from power development, right? Because it kind of works on their endurance and their neuromuscular edge as well. So guess what I had them do? I had them do unilateral isometric holds away from the thoracic cavity. And the reason why, because the thoracic cavity is what they want to avoid. So it's not isometric exercises. It's the pressure from the thoracic cavity that causes the issue. So if I do a leg raise and I have them breathing continuously and avoiding this pressure build right here to do the leg raise, then they should be okay. And it has to be not maximal effort, because if not, they're going to have that thoracic pressure build up, because that's how people compensate. We like to use the center of our body to produce force. So there's ways around it again, but there was that risk again of me doing an isometric movement, increasing the thoracic pressure, which increases a higher chance of the aneurysm going wrong. But again, we modified and went unilateral and got away from the thoracic pressure. So there's different things out there and different ways of doing things, right? Same thing as power. Let's say we'll go back to that physician saying that you can use isometric exercise and movements. If I did power, what's going to be the RPP of that person, the rate pressure production of that person? It's going to be skyrocketed, right? Because it's power. And then that puts a higher risk on the aortic cavity, right? And the thoracic cavity and the pressure. So even though they said no, none of this, if I did the opposite and I did something that they didn't recommend, or how can I say, they didn't even know about, I could still cause the same damage. So this is why an educated individual has to work with kind of knowing the boundaries and what they really specify. Because my English can mean someone else's English. And we could keep talking about this because this is a great topic, and I love dealing with kind of pushing boundaries and getting it as close as I can to helping these individuals or just clinical population. So stay tuned if you want to listen a little bit more on the clinical pop and how to improve on that, because you might get some tips for your performance. All right, guys, I'll talk to you later. Happy Monday.